The idea here is that the UK will be developing, together with the Ukraine, a missile that can strike Russian forces deep behind Russian lines. So it's going to very radically extend the ability of Ukrainian forces who will be operating the missile to actually hit the Russians in a way that the Russians themselves have hitherto been able to avoid. And that, of course, means, firstly, that Russia's ability to operate is going to be constrained because they can be hit further afield. It means they're going to have to move their functional units back further still, which will, of course, impact upon their ability to deploy in that way. And secondly, it could well increase the pressure on Vladimir Putin militarily and help, move things towards peace on the battlefield. Well, it's going to have some impact on the state of the war because, of course, if you extend the ability of the Ukrainians to hit the Russians, you're going to have an ability of Ukraine to actually end up, causing damage to Russia in a way it couldn't do so beforehand, and that may well have some implications for command and control capabilities and what goes on the battlefield. But it's not going to be a panacea. It's not going to be the silver bullet that ends a war by itself. I mean, the Russians have got a lot of resilience, obviously, that they will be able to dig into. They've got reserves of men in a way the Ukrainians do not. So it'll hamper Russia's abilities, but it won't win the war on its own. Well, Russia and UK are already, of course, not on very good terms. So I think the idea that this particular missile development is going to sort of take things into a new Cold War, it's probably overblown. I mean, we're probably in the Cold War already in that sense. So it's not going to on its own create a crisis point in British-Russian relations. That crisis point has been reached by Russia's invasion of Ukraine already. And equally, because it's not a silver bullet on the battlefield, it's not going to, on its own, turn the war, and it's not going to fundamentally stop the Russians. I suspect the Russians will, make a lot of noise about it, but ultimately will allow it to pass in the same way they have allowed lots of other weapons to come on stream, as it were, for Ukraine without really any form of retaliation against those who are supplying them. So yes, it is slightly different because it is a weapon being developed, with Ukraine, and therefore it is a slightly different focus to previously. But because it's not going to shift the actual ultimate battlefield, the Russians are unlikely to turn this into a World War III scenario. The Russians are already engaged in hybrid warfare, as has been suggested. So the idea they're going to either ramp up or reduce in response to particular things that we do doesn't take into account that the Russians are playing their own game already. They will increase pressure against the West in a hybrid form if they feel that they are losing and under pressure on the battlefield. So in that sense, if this does lead to some degree of imbalance on the ground, they will then probably strike back. But this is to be expected anyway. I mean, we have to be realistic about this. The Russians are engaged in hybrid warfare right now, and they're going to continue to be engaged in hybrid warfare. They'll do cyber attacks. They will look at any weaknesses in our system. And our best defense against that is not to stop supplying Ukraine or doing things with Ukraine, but to make sure our own defenses are bolstered, to make it quite clear to the Russians that they're wasting their time, firstly. And secondly, if they do come after us directly, we can hit back directly as well. Well, the best way to cut off, Russian oil as such is to look at things like the refineries that are actually shipping that oil and producing it and shipping it. That's a place where you're going to want to, target those things, and that's a sanctions job rather than necessarily a missile job. So look, the purpose of this is simply to assist the Ukrainians in their targeting capabilities. Like I said, it will not it will not win the war on its own. It is just one more part of the jigsaw puzzle to help the Ukrainians on their battlefront initiatives, just to increase the pain level on Russia. But that does require other tactics to be put in as well. In particular, a more rigorous secondary sanctions approach, particularly by the Americans, because that is what will then lead to the financial pain, which, allied to the military pain, might well and should bring Vladimir Putin to the negotiating table finally. Right now, he's not getting there because we are not doing enough on all fronts to increase the pain level, to make it seem less painful to negotiate a peace rather than keep on fighting a war that he thinks he will ultimately win. Well, so encouragingly, this is not the benefit of this weapon is not simply that we're developing it for Ukraine, but we're developing it from the UK as well. There's been a lot of criticism, I think quite rightly, that the UK is giving away a lot of its stocks of ammunition, material, without replenishing them. No one's suggesting that we shouldn't be supplying Ukraine, but there's been a genuine question about whether we are doing enough to replenish our own supplies. So the good part about this particular initiative is that the UK will stand to gain its own new weapon as a result of doing this work with Ukraine. And it's worth noting, of course, the Ukrainian defense industry has come on leaps and bounds during this war. And if the UK can gain some competitive advantage by working with it in this area, then we are both bolstering our own industry, but also taking advantage of one of the more developed industries now in Europe as well to enhance our own national security. So this does seem to be that elusive win-win that have always been looking for. Yes, there's a tremendous advantage here that you actually get to test out the kit straight away, and so in that sense alone, it can be adapted, it can be adopted, its successes can be replicated. If there are any failures or weaknesses, they can be addressed in real time. It does give you a chance to do something which is very unusual for weapons, which is to put them straight out into the field and to see how they perform. And hopefully, of course, they'll perform very well, and they can therefore provide a mainstay not simply for the Ukrainians and the British for that matter, but possibly exports as well. So this is a weapon that could in fact have advantages for the UK economy, not simply because of its manufacturing, but also because of the potential sales that could come if it's shown to be a success.